All right, well, we'll just start again. Bad microphone. That's all right. I was trying something different this time, guys. I think it'll work now. I'll start all over again. Hey, guys, welcome to the Upstairs to Right Music channel. This is Mike McWilliams, Sunday at Mike's. Good to be here again. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time with me here on this channel. Technical difficulties and all. First minute of this is going to be no good. But spending a little bit of your time with me is always greatly appreciated. Let me say hello to everybody here in the chat. Scott, thank you for pointing that out. Cat's Music Journey, welcome. Mr. Watson, welcome. Ben O'Work, welcome. Good, good, good. We got the technical. Yeah, I was trying a different microphone, guys, tonight, and I'm looking at the software for that, and it says that it was running through, but I guess not. I'm just going to stick with the old fashioned stuff. It's always the best way to go. Hey guys, glad to be here with you. Um, I was saying that this week um, some interesting things happened. I went to Christmas market in Harlem, which is about a 20-minute train ride from here, and I had a good time there. If you ever get a chance to go to a European Christmas market, they are all certainly worth seeing, especially the larger ones. And got in the Christmas spirit a little bit. But of course, Saturday came along. I was walking my dog in the park, and I just started to feel a little off, and it just got worse through the day. I came down with something. I have no idea what it was. It wasn't a cold. Wasn't quite a fever. It was like a headache, and I couldn't think straight. It was like a heavy kind of pressure, like feeling on my head. And I have to say that I'll chime in on the cold. By the way, Ben, it's cold here, so that might have had something to do. I don't know, but I felt off. I was in bed pretty much well all day yesterday, and trying to take it easy today. I'd say I'm about 85% there. So I'll try to see how much of this live stream I can get through tonight. I'm feeling better. But no, it's not minus 13 here. I can't even say that we haven't gotten to the minus. Actually, we had one minus day a week or so ago, but no, I can't even compare it to minus 10 or minus 12, fellas. It's cold here, but that's freaking freezing. 15 in Missouri. Yeah, well, I spoke to my parents and my brother actually in Utah, and he said they're having a heat wave in Utah. He says it's 15. I didn't know 15 constituted as a heat wave, but yeah, I saw that, Michael. As well in Utah, same kind of weather going on. But I'm better, guys. I'm about 85% of the way there. So bear with me tonight. Obviously, minus 30 last week. My gosh, that is insane. I can't even imagine that. That's pretty cold. Um, I learned something this week that no matter how much you study and look into things, you can make mistakes. And I had a error that I overlooked that I'll put on me. I won't put on anybody else. I'll put it on myself in regards to one of the vintage guitars that I imported. If you guys remember, I had that SG and the Korean SG, and I overlooked, I don't know how they did it. Somehow or another, the seller who sold it to me, there was actually pretty bad cracking in the neck area. It's a similar guitar. So the area in here was separated. It was actually very loose. The action was kind of high, but I thought I didn't really, because a lot of those vintage guitars, when they come in, the action can be pretty high on them. And that's just a truss rod adjustment. I didn't think much about it, but as it turned out, it had a cracked neck. And if you remember, I traded that guitar in with my good friend Patrick at Patrick's Guitars, um, for the Pacifica. And when he got a chance to dig into it and look at, he found that, and I was mortified because generally, as you know, we get a lot of guitars that come through here. And even before they get to me, I try to be very discerning and very careful with who I buy from. Um, and I have to say that Patrick was a gentleman about it. We worked it out, and I really appreciate him understanding with that. But this is kind of a PSA. You know, these guys over in Japan nowadays aren't the guys that I was dealing with, for the last 30 some odd years. Uh, and 18 years living there and the rest out. But I am finding more disreputable sellers online, guys that, even in Japan, before it was almost unheard of. It leads me to believe that probably some of these new sellers are, there's something else going on there. I don't even want to speculate, but yeah, even I have one slip through. So I was mortified this week. I was absolutely mortified that that guitar had that crack in it, and I didn't even notice it. They had used the there's a right here in the back on there's the strap pin, and apparently, I guess he said that they had used a strap pin to hold it in place so that you wouldn't really notice that. I saw the cracking on the sides, but I didn't see any kind of a move to it. That you get that cracking and separation there in the side joints as well. It's not a great thing, but it doesn't mean, well, in this case it did, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you got a cracked neck, especially with those older Les Pauls and SGs. But anyway, it did. And just as a PSA, guys, just be careful buying things from overseas. Even with me and all the guitars that I go through, something like that slipped through. I had only one other guitar, that bass, um, and I stopped buying from that seller. But the bass, it seems, will be salvageable as well. But even that was a few clicks back, and I caught that immediately. That didn't go out. But really, just watch it out there, guys. Out there when you're buying overseas, and you can't test it out, take a look at it because it's getting kind of slimy out there. I and even myself, I have to let go some of my assumptions as well. Uh, I would check, of course, as best as I could, but now I'm going to check and double check before I purchase anything from Japan going forward. You just have to be careful out there. So there is that. Who we got here? Hans Mutter. Hey, how you doing, sir? Welcome. Welcome. Hey guys, we got more people here in the chat. Enough here. I can move on to another subject. I brought out this. You guys remember this? This is an iPod. On this iPod, I have maybe 30 or 32 or 33 albums worth of music of different artists on this. And I never let it go. I still keep it. I'm sorry, there's something here in the chat. It looks pretty big. Ben. Oh, Mike, wait a minute. Sorry. I have to put my eyes on. My R36S handheld gaming console showed up. I'm going to have to take a course or watch some videos to figure it out. Thanks for the recommendation, though. It looks awesome. Yeah. Uh, uh, the information is very sparse on those. Um, um, how to save games, because they, you can't save games. You can, you if you're in the middle of a game, you want to stop, you can save that. Actually, there's a way to do it. But it is a pretty cool thing. And cheers, I'm glad you're enjoying it. This one by here behind me, I'm going to wrap up here in a couple of days and put under the Christmas tree for my brother when he comes to town. But this is my plan. And, this was what I think that music kind of changed, because MP3s actually had a lot going for them. When we moved away from this device to this device, and this became a streaming device and a phone and a computer and and a weather teller, God knows what else, amateur porn maker, we lost something. If we had stayed in this realm with the MP3, I think that the music landscape these days, even with the advent of AI, will look a little bit different. And I still hold on to this, and I still have those albums. This is my one physical media thing. If this thing breaks, then I'm SOL. But if I were to go on a desert island and had no Wi-Fi, I've got tunes. I got tunes for days on this thing. And when we moved away from devices like this, again, like I said, we lost something. We lost, because with an MP3, as an artist, you could put that up on Bandcamp. People would download it to their iPod, and there was a one-to-one transactional thing that could occur. There would still be the interest in terms of an artist and who that artist was, and focusing on that, like you would with a cassette or a CD, or a record. Um, when you moved into streaming, like I said, you really lost that transactional thing between the artist and the consumer, and a big connection as well. And that kind of got me thinking about tonight's subject. And that actually is the springboard for tonight's discussion: how musicians grow out of their gear. This extends also to musicians as well, because, you know, as technology progresses, we tend to move on from things. Um, there is a recent push to go back to analog hardware as opposed to software plugins these days. And there's a resurgence also, uh, for these kind of devices as well. A lot of Gen Z kids are, are folks, she can't say kids in everybody's case, are really trying to go back to this kind of technology where these are starting to make a comeback. Well, musicians grow out of their gear, for along those lines, and for a couple of other reasons that I really wanted to talk about tonight. When you first start out, you're playing with what you can get. I think we can all pretty much will attest to that. An inexpensive electric guitar, in my case, um, you know, it was mostly chord guitars and and Japanese Squires, which ended up being actually pretty sweet guitars. At the time, they were not considered to be the best. They were actually kind of frowned upon. But you know how that goes. Now everybody can't get enough of them. But you'd have that. Practice amp probably had no reverb on it. And while today's self, the today me maybe, would probably find that limiting, that's actually where creativity starts, where the spark of creativity kicks in. And you have to make the most out of those first pedals or amps or guitars that you had in order to push your sound. Now, I brought out this Harley Benton tonight. So this guitar, this Harley Benton, um, is what, interesting enough, people these days consider to be a budget guitar. However, guitars like this Harley Benton, I've made some modification. I've changed the pickups and I've done a few other things to it, but basically it's still the same guitar. Um, these guitars at the beginning, when they first came out, were considered to be budget guitars. And then a couple of guys started touring with them. The first video on YouTube that I can remember is a gentleman who was playing his Harley Benton Les Paul uh, for a gig in Las Vegas, a big gig, a serious gig for 3 months. And he documented that, and he said the guitar was fine. I had no issues with it. It played fine, and it was great. And a lot of people would then start to reevaluate what is exactly a budget guitar. I myself used this exact same Harley Benton guitar for my last album. As a matter of fact, just as a kind of a hoot, I thought that I would play the intro of that. For Mr. Sun, the rhythm guitars on this, all of the rhythm guitars that you hear in that song are this Harley Benton. And I submit to you that you, if I were to take this guitar and give it to the younger me, would I be wise enough to know that it's a quality guitar, even though at that time people would possibly still label it as a beginner guitar or as a budget guitar? Much in the same way, when I was a kid, I was told that those Court guitars and those Japanese made Squires were quote unquote budget guitars. But again, as I pointed out, now they're considered to be, you know, well sought after. And I wonder in another 30 years if we'll get that to that point with this Harley Benton. But, you know, you start out, you play with the best that you can get. And I submit to you that maybe a lot of us had a lot better than we thought we had starting out. Uh, and maybe because of FOMO, because of gas, because of peer pressure, we may have been talked out of pretty decent rigs that we had at one point or another, even maybe even in the beginning. Um, because I can tell you for a fact that if I still had that Japanese made Squire that I bought, really as my first real guitar, um, all those years back, I would still be playing that. I would still be gigging that guitar. I'd still have it because it's an excellent guitar. Yet at that time, again, like I said, it was considered to be a budget guitar. So let's talk about that. As you improve, your gear will flow along with that growth. You start to get more specific with your needs or with your sound also as well, the needs in order to craft that sound. And maybe you begin to move from the basic amp to another amp or start experimenting with speakers. You start getting, you get a pedal, a reverb pedal for the first time. So you start playing around with tonal control. Um, and because you spent that time with that basic equipment where you knew, you learned also the mechanics of how things work too. So that when you moved to the next amp, it wasn't you weren't turning knobs guessing what it was. From your previous amp, you kind of learned how things work. And it became a learning progression as it went up. Get back here to the chat. Mike, are you all ready for Sinterklaas? Yes. As I was saying, I went on Friday to that Christmas market, and that was really that put me in the Christmas mood. I saw three Santas that day. I saw a really small Santa. I saw a Santa riding a electric reindeer, and I saw another Santa playing saxophone. And boy, the food was good there, by the way. I picked up something there in that crowd, but it was worth it. I still think it was worth it. So I'm still in the Christmassy Santa Claus mood, and I did see him yesterday. Three of them. It was like one, two, three. you know, it becomes not, and then maybe again. I'm just talking tonight about how musicians grow. I'm I'm talking about how I grew up and went through my musical progression in terms of the instruments and things that I had when I can. But I think it extends out to everybody. I think that this is a common kind of progression that we all make as musicians, regardless of the instruments, drums or the bass guitar or the tuba, I guess, whatever. But you make that progression. And let's be honest, when we're kids, our parents, which are the going to be maybe in some cases are going to be the ones that are going to get you a guitar, most of the cases, they're not going to heavily invest in anything a lot of money. So they would actually see something like this 200 and whatever 70-year-old guitar, they would see that as being a expensive guitar, not as a budget guitar. And so that played a lot of it as well. Um, at least in my case, for sure, because my father is like, yeah, we did that guitar thing again. Yeah, maybe I'll just borrow my buddies, and you guys know how that story worked out. um, Musicians get a synergy from obtaining better or more individualized tunes. Yes, sir. Let's get into that. Let's talk about that. As you improve, your gear needs to match that growth. You start, as I said, getting more specific in your sound. You start getting into your tonal control. You're not just playing to practice or fool around anymore. You're actually starting to play to create. And that's that next progression. And for me, that occurred, I would say, around the time I was 13 or 14. And I started hanging around with other kids in my neighborhood who were musicians, um, and had bands, because I didn't play sports. I didn't want to play, you know, any kind of sports or anything like that. Although I taught sports during the summers, interestingly enough, but I really wanted to play. And that was an experience where I took that next step up because I started also learning the dynamics of working with other people, other musicians. And that I've been invited. I got invited to this one dude's house once. By this time, it was before I went to Japan. And it was before I really, it was right after college. I hadn't started working with Reggie yet. And I got invited from a coworker at my office to come over to his house and jam. He says, "Oh man, I heard you play. Why don't you come over to my place and jam?" And so I drove out to his place. It was out in Los Feliz area of LA, and got there. And he had some of his friends, and he had a garage. He had a drum kit. He had a bass guitar amp. And I brought my guitar, and he had an amp for that, and some keyboards. And so they we just started playing a little bit, and he had some girl over, and most of the trouble that I've ever encountered in studios or with bands or ever always started around a girl. I didn't even pay this girl the time. I didn't pay her any attention. Only later on did I figure out that he had a thing for her, and I guess maybe he was trying to impress her, like, "Yeah, come over and check out my band." What happened was I sat down on the drums and I started playing a lick. And then they were like, "Oh, that's pretty good." And then I got up and I went over, I picked up my guitar and I started playing. And she started saying, "Oh, wow, you can play, a lot of instruments." And I could see the dude from my office face kind of drop. Believe me, I was not invited back to another jam session after that. But again, learning those dynamics of working and dealing with people is a next step in that growth. And and also this is the stage where peer pressure comes in, because if you walk in with uh, Harley Benton, you know, and not a Gibson or a Fender or hell, even a Squire these days, then you're considered to be a little lowbrow. Back in those days, back in those days. So peer pressure had a lot to do with it, to a certain extent, to a certain extent. Um, and this can have an effect upon you as well. The psychology of that, that's where that mindset and that psychology sets in, where you've got I love the sound of this guitar. I love the way it feels, love everything about it, but it doesn't say Fender on the headstock. It's like, right. Um, let's see. What's your favorite shop shape, Hans? Oh, Hans likes SG. Nice. Why would we want to know this? Tim says. Well, because that's actually a very valid question. I actually want to take time to answer that one, because it helps you as you progress as a producer and as a musician to understand the psychology and the steps that you'll go through as being one of those. You're going to start out as a kid, like I did, working your way through small studios, eventually working your way into the big ones. And during that progression, then you're going to get to the later stage of your life, like I am now, pushing 60, that I'm not going to be doing or thinking or rethink and analyze some of the things that I did when I was younger. And all of us will go through this progression. And if we can take a look at that, it will really, really help us understand our next step. And if you're young enough and you hear this message, maybe it might prevent you from making some mistakes or maybe going in the right direction. People teach you two things: what to do and what not to do. And it's up to you to decide which person you follow and you listen to. So this is more along the lines, not so much of what to do and what not to do, but how it is. I guess this is a third category tonight. So I hope that answers your question. You can always steer the conversation by adding your 2 cents to the mix. Yeah, Scott's right. As you see, Tim, you did. My issue is using all the fancy new gear that I have. Yet again, Scott, when I heard you playing that song, um, yeah, my brain is foggy. You know, um, all you had was your voice, the guitar, and the track in the back, and I thought that was great. I love that. Oh man, what is wrong with what is the song? We were just talking about it, Scott. What was that track that I commented on? Oh gosh, guys, this is terrible. When you this, really seriously, I feel cognitively less. with whatever this virus is that I've got. Yeah, if you leave me now. If you leave me now, you take away the biggest part of me. I love that song. Um, you don't again, if you strip that all the way down to the basics, then you were 100% of where you needed to be. I think that Prince, at one stage of his life, if I can always, bring him into the conversation, because he's a good example of all these things. At one point of his life, he was stripping things down. He was stripping away, and musically, he was getting away a lot of stuff. And he was reverting, as I said, towards the end of his life, towards some of the earlier tools that he used when he was much younger, half the age he was. And this is again a progression that we go through. It's not just about finding a better guitar, it's about finding your voice and your tone at this stage. And you may already be there, but you can get talked out of good tone by other people. So, you know, I guess knowing what your tone is or really establishing it in that first stage is really key. Because if you are really steadfast and you like the direction you're going and you like your sound, and other people like your sound, then you're on the right track. And even if the occasional naysayer comes along and criticizes you for your rig or for your sound, you're like, you know what? I'm good. I'm still floating this way. I'm not going to listen to you. But if you start to let the naysayer get into your head, then you can start going on probably a tone hunt that may be unnecessary. You know. So you start making small upgrades to your sound at this point, at this stage. And eventually you move, then this is where a lot of people will stay, by the way, as well. Michael Watson. I think one of the biggest mistakes musicians make is that they feel they have become too sophisticated to use anything but the best. Yeah. I'm skirting around that tonight a little bit, Michael, because that is true. Um, I'm skirting around that, I guess, a bit here tonight, but that is absolutely true. I'm more suggesting that you can get talked out of a good sound. Just like, I had a girl in high school named Cecilia. She's a very sweet girl, really sweet. She adored me. I liked her too. And um, I let a friend of mine get in my ear saying, "Oh man, you could do better than her. You don't need her," And to this day, I regret uh, that very much. You can get talked out of a lot of things in this life that you can get talked out of a good thing. You can get talked out of a good thing, is the point of that story. And I think I skirt around the issue of needing better, in order to say that maybe you already have good enough. And if you start out with that belief and that steadfastness of mindset, then maybe that's not an important thing. I think that musician who toured with that Harley Benton guitar was that type of guy. He said, "Hey, I got a gig. I need a guitar that's going to last me 6 months doing this. Was it 5 or 6 nights a week? In Vegas show, or maybe even daytime shows as well." And he, in his mind, saw the Harley Benton as being the best. So then, if the world doesn't agree with that opinion, what was the criteria that he was using in order to draw that conclusion? And maybe that might be the criteria that we want to follow along as well. At this point, the gear at this pro stage, like this guy, the gear isn't just an instrument, it's an extension of your creativity. You put in the work, you got a specific sound, the pedal or the amp or the guitar or whatever that makes you, you hear in your head that makes it personal. And then you begin to realize that no matter what, eventually you begin to realize that regardless of the guitar or maybe even the rig or the amp or the pedal, you can still dial in that sound. And I got to that stage in Japan because in 19 what was that, the 1997, we didn't have sophisticated modelers at all. And I was playing guitar and keyboards in the band in Nagoya, the cover band in Nagoya. And I had a rhythm guitar. And I had to mimic again a lot of different records and a lot of different, but I began to realize that regardless, it was my sound. So I just played my sound, but I played those licks using my sound. Does that make sense? I came to this realization. I stopped chasing tone as far as what we were doing producing live. A lot of guys say, "Oh, I'm doing a cover band, so I've got to have all these different guitars and all these different pedals in order to achieve all these different sounds." We kind of gave that up. Just played it, and strictly we didn't make alterations to the arrangement, but it ended up being okay. It was good. And when I wasn't worried about, I remember very clearly when I wasn't worried about getting that, James Brown, Wah Wah Watson sound. And I said, let's just play it and play it myself. And I'm not going to sound like Wah Wah, certainly, and I'm not going to capture that tone. Let's just get it as close as we can. It freed me up so that I could start actually playing. And then as a band, we started really, cooking because we weren't worried about, that kind of thing. And this is a Japanese audience, by the way. They're very sophisticated. They know it. They'll hear it. It doesn't quite sound right, "Honto ne, so janai." You don't want to hear that from the audience. So that was a revelation, and that occurred at that professional stage. At this point, the pro gear stage is more than just tonal perfection. It's about consistency, durability, and feeling connected, as was being pointed out, to the instrument, this kinetic kind of energy that occurs. And you have this synergy, the synthesis of consistency, durability, and connected to the instrument that really becomes the genesis of when you realize that, it doesn't matter what it says on the headstock. It doesn't matter the price, whether it's $100 or $100,000. It comes down to those criteria. As I was saying, in my opinion, these are the criteria that I use as a professional musician. I think that this is the criteria, something very similar that musician who gigged his Harley Benton guitar in Vegas. I think it's the mentality of Mike Rutherford of Genesis when he goes out on stage and plays his Squires, affinities, by the way. Not even what is that, classic vibe? I always Is that what it is? Yeah, classic vibe. Not even that, he's playing affinities. And I think it comes down that he realized that it fits that criteria of consistency, durability, and he felt connected to the instrument. They felt connected to the instrument. And that occurs, but that doesn't necessarily have to occur at the pro stage. But I think that as you go along that progression up, or at least as I did, that's where your mindset kind of changes. Now, did it stop me from my guitar gas? No. Knowing that and putting it in practice until recently were two different things. But I was cognizant of that, and it didn't make a big deal to me. That's why I wasn't finicky. I was never like, oh, we only have this. Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. Just let's go. I didn't care. Like we'll make whatever. In other words, you become free because you know what it is you're looking for, and you're saying, well, that looks like that can achieve that, so that's good enough, and that frees you up actually to just play. You know. So that consistency, that durability, and that connection to the instrument is ultimately what is, your true goal in terms of your gear journey. And as you go along these stages, of course, you grow out of certain things. Some things you retain, some things you discard. That's just a natural progression. But I think if you find consistency, durability, and a connection, then there is no difference between basic gear and pro gear, you know. And if there is, then the only differences would be the price, maybe the features, but again, that depends upon your needs. So while gear is important, creativity and growth are the real factors that shape your sound. And I submit that this progression that we took from being kids, again, at least in my case, playing in garage bands, first playing at home, strumming along with the radio, and then playing with the garage bands, and then moving into the big boys, the big times. Um, Along each one of those steps of the way, I made a progression and I learned things. And I think that if I skipped one of those tiers, if I went straight to pro gear when I was a kid, I don't know if that would have been such a great thing. You know, it might have, as a matter of fact, pro gear might have been too overwhelming. Actually, it's like what is this? Would I know how to use the toe knobs on a at that stage? You know, So what's the use of having that until you learn how to ride the tone and the volume knobs on an SG or Les Paul, or if you learn how to get that in between phase sound on a three uh, switch Strat, then again, these are things that I learned at the younger stages, the earlier stages, so that I was able to apply them as I went along. We've all been there, buying that pedal, think it's going to make us sound like X, but when we plug it in, we realize it's still just us playing. Gear is only going to get you so far. And it's the creativity behind it that really matters the most. Again, um, this song, that rhythm guitar is just this SG here. It's not, and it sounds like $1 million. It sounds great. I didn't think to myself when I was recording this, um, well, it's a Harley Benton, so it's not good enough for my recording. I was honestly thinking to myself, well, I'm going to use this guitar for the solo, and I don't like using the same guitars in the mix, left and right. So let me use this. Let me throw this Harley Benton in the mix, and I love those rhythm guitar tracks for that song. And therefore, when I freed myself up from worrying about, oh gosh, I don't have a Gibson to record this, or oh, my mate's got my Fender. I'm not worried about those things. I'm looking around saying, you know what, you'll do. That'll work as long as it's in time and in tune. It'll work. I wish there was some modern music that has the soul sound of the '70s, Scott says. You know, I was just watching a report that said that rock has bottomed out as far as a genre that people like to go see live. Only 33% of the revenue that came in this year from live concerts came from rock bands. And most of those rock bands we're talking about not, B tier. We're talking about Rolling Stones, Oasis, things like that, that generated that revenue. And even then, it's not even a fraction of what it used to. I mean, it used to be in the double that years ago. It used to represent double that. Now it's fallen down to 33%. And the sound that people are really digging these days, I bring this up, Scott. The sound that people are going back and digging is actually R&B and pop. So I think that there's a better chance of there being more modern or newer singers in those genres going forward, uh, that might create, they may and you got Gen Z people who love those old records. So you may have young producers who are trying to reach back and create that sound. Um, there was the neo soul era of the '90s. I think was the last best example of that, where a lot of producers, including myself, were reaching back to stuff that was going on back in the '70s. KZ in chat. Hey now, how you doing, KZ? Welcome to the chat. Cheers to you, sir. You know, gear only gets you so far. It's the creativity behind it that really matters. The beauty of growth is when your sound evolves around you. And the gear is just a tool for that journey. The best players can take any gear and make it their own. And that's when you kind of learn that. Now, of course, buy the best gear that you can afford, whether it's one or 20, buy the best ones that you can afford. Or rather, should I restate that and say, buy the best ones for you, whether that's one or 20. And that's a groovy thing, but make it your own. Make all 20 of them your own. We all have, I've had a situation where I had a room full of guitars. And what did I end up doing? I always reach for the same one every time. No kidding. No kidding. So that's when I began to also realize that, hey, maybe these other ones are a bit much, maybe not necessary. Mike, are you a fan of Roy Ayers? Of course. Yes. Yeah. Again, growing up in Los Angeles, there was a radio station called KKGO. And whenever my father was driving, when I was in the car with him, whenever he was in town in between flights, because he was an airline pilot, captain, KKGO was on. Yeah, Roy Ayers would be a name amongst a long list of musicians that I grew up listening and I'm a fan of certain periods of jazz music, and certainly Roy Ayers comes out of that period for sure, without any question. Um, at the end of the day, whether you're playing your first guitar or you just got a custom one, it's your creativity and growth that's going to make your sound special. You have to embrace the journey. And you know, it seems to me that not poverty, but lack of resources can sometimes spark creativity in folks to make the most of what little they have. If we think of some of our favorite musicians, they weren't wealthy people. Eddie Van Halen, the reason he put together the Frankenstrat is because he didn't have enough money to buy the guitar that, or have the guitar that he wanted made. And so he had to make it himself. He couldn't afford to even buy one. The Van Halens were very poor. They were not wealthy. Um, and I think that he embraced the journey so much so, and he was so clear on the sound. Yeah, Van Halen would be another good example of what I'm talking about. Again, durability, um, accessibility, and a connection to the instrument through him building it. All those things were there. And he knew what the sound was that he was looking for. And he embraced the journey, and he didn't get caught so much up in the gear. Um, he got caught up in making the gear. It really is Frankenstein. It's like creating life. It's like he created this sound, this life that he needed, or that he had to do the engineering on in order to get there. Brian May's guitar, the one that the stories say that he made with his father, um, would be another example of that, I would suppose. Talk about embracing the journey. I mean, that's been his one and only guitar. He hasn't played anything else, you know, for decades. So again, embracing. And again, in that case, the personal connection in that story, the accessibility, the durability is there, and the connection there is, of course, it's something that he made with his father. So it's those are the things that I've just boiled it down to being the things that really you should be looking at, regardless whether it's guitar, bass, drum set, or tuba. You should be thinking along those lines. And I think if you do, you'll find yourself in a much better position down the road than most folks. So just a thought, just a thought. Cat's music journey. I like that you're highlighting the journey aspect of all of this. It took me to a very different place than I imagined when I started loving it. Yeah, I'm going down Recollection Road. You ever watch that YouTube channel, Recollection Road, where this is what life was like in 1970? And I'm like, well, I remember all of that very clearly. And we look back in hindsight, oh gosh, I wish I had collected those damn stupid, moon rock things, because now, you can get, 10 grand for them. They're, collectors thing, hindsight being all that. But it's the same thing I was thinking when it comes to how musicians grow out of their gear. If you're going along this progression of these steps, again, I've pointed out that my fear these days for the younger generations that progression is no longer available, because a lot of those systems that I went through are no longer in place. It's just like going through school. You didn't get to the ninth grade or the 10th grade unless you graduated from the ninth, you know. So you graduated up this pathway. And yes, again, as I said, there was gatekeepers along the way, but I submit to you that maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. Um, but yeah, my own personal recollection road. And the other takeaway from this, like I said, don't let anybody talk you out of a good thing. Never ever let anybody, talk you out of a good thing, because you will regret it. For sure. It's funny that I should bring up Cecilia because, there's an example of letting a friend who later on ended up being, the snake that he always was, that he truly was, showed his well, he was showing his true colors then. I just wasn't smart enough to see it, you know, the whole bro before hose kind of mantra. Don't let anybody talk you out of a good thing. If you got a Harley Benton, you know, like this one, especially the first run. When they first came out with these. I bought these, so they're great guitars. I don't know how they are now, but this guitar, I tried to donate it away. I couldn't find anybody. I believe me, I really did try, but I couldn't find a donation for it. Like some of the other guitars. And I said, you know what? That's fate telling me you just need to hold on to it. And I'm glad I did, because this guitar, I can play you that track and say, this guitar played that. And that doesn't sound like a budget guitar to me, at least to my ears. So, what does that say? And then when I look at this guitar, it represents durability, as accessibility, and also the personal connection is that it sounded good on the record that day. I, you know, Different pickups, not these pickups, but still, you know. And I want it, and it's just, it's a great guitar, and I'm not looking at it what's on the headstock or how much I paid for it. I'm looking at, how it performs and does it give me my sound. And if my sound really is all here and here, then as long as it's a decent instrument, then you're probably all right. Don't let anybody ever talk you out of a good thing. A car, a girl, a guy, for those of you who are into that thing, a watch, a vacation, anything. Don't let anybody ever talk you out of anything, really don't, because you'll regret it. You will regret it. And if you're a musician and you got buddies who are talking to you and being gear snobs and saying, that's not this or that's not that or that's a budget guitar or that's a baby guitar or whatever, you need to find yourself a different set of friends to play with, you know. And that's just the truth of it. So don't let anybody ever talk you out of anything. That's a good thing. If they're trying to talk you out of jumping off the roof, then maybe you might want to listen in. I don't think that's a good thing. But don't let anybody ever talk you out of a piece of gear, because that will happen at some point or at all points of that journey, believe it or not. I've walked in the studio with a bass guitar, and the engineer told me that, we're not going to use that one, we'll use this one. And I didn't like that when I said, let me do a track with this bass guitar and then let me do the overdubs with this guitar with mine. He said, fine. And he ended up liking my bass guitar, and it was a PV. It was a PV. But because it was a PV and wasn't a Fender, it wasn't any good in his book. But it sounded better when we're playing back. It's like, oh, well, they're not matching up. The overdubs sound better. The tone's better. Yeah, it's like, for fuck's sake. I think there is hope. I started 6 years ago thinking I'm a Les Paul guy playing high gain Marshalls. Now I play a Strat into it. Yeah, dig that, man. And that's my sound. Yeah, I discovered that my favorite sound is a Les Paul going through any Fender amp. My second favorite sound is a Strat going through any Fender amp. When on my rig setup, I'm geared towards a Fender amp sound. And you just figure that out. I can make, I can do funk, I can do rock, I can do rhythm guitar, whatever, leads, whatever, with this combination. And you figure that out, and then it doesn't matter, as long as it meets those criteria, you're good. I can't believe it, guys. As sick as I was yesterday, I mean, just sick as a dog, I cannot believe that I actually made it through an hour tonight. I can't believe it. Yeah, I said, I was speaking to my brother. I said, I'm going to try to make it through 30 or 40 minutes tonight, but we'll see because I always call him on Sundays. And here I've made a whole hour. So I'm quite impressed. I am going to go though. And you'll excuse the abruptness of me going, but I think much like Cinderella, I'm starting to turn into a pumpkin. I couldn't even remember, that song title. The biggest, take away the biggest part of me. That's how fried I am. But thanks, guys. I want to thank each and every one of you for showing up. I said also to my brother, because my family says, well, you don't, maybe you should call off, but I say no because these guys always show up for me. I said that to my brother tonight. These guys always show up for me and they're always there when I do a live stream. So I always want to show up for them and be there for them as well. For something interesting, at least something to chew over or to consider. If you haven't considered it, I would like for you to consider uh, signing up to this channel, joining the conversation by subscribing with us. I would love to have you here. Also, I would love to hear some comments down in the comments section. I always ask you guys, please comment down whether you're watching this live or in the rerun. Give me a word down in the comment section. That means a lot because it also shows engagement with YouTube as well. So let's do that as well. And let's grow this. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Scott, I'm glad you got done with that business, by the way. I don't know what that business was you had to handle on your naughty list, but I am glad to have you back, man. I missed you a great deal. Um, Glad to have you back. I'm glad you took care of that. And good to see all you guys. God bless each and every one of you. You guys take care. I'll see you. Bye bye.